I was talking to someone I've known for many years, and they were building a team. They're not in the tech space, and they were just asking me about some advice for building their team. And one of the things we got onto was sabotage thinking, imposter syndrome, which is really crippling. But one of the things I did talk about to them is exactly what we're going to talk about today, which is identity level statements. So these are very, very important statements that we make about ourselves that are, I think, above all else, control our behavior. So if you're thinking about creating results, the thing we want to do is we want to create results. How do we create results? By actions. How do we create actions? By the decisions we take to take that particular action over another one. And then how do we make decisions? Well, it's from how we think. So what I want to talk about today is, a mindset thing. And as I was speaking to this guy, he lives in New Jersey, and I just said, mindset without practical application is pretty much useless in my book. I've been doing this for many years, and there's loads of stuff on mindset, but without practical application, what are you going to do with it? So you can meditate on a rock, you can think about stuff, but unless you do something with it, which you're happy with, you get a result you particularly want, whatever that result is, that you can look at mindset stuff forever, and it will do you very little good in the real world. But if you can turn it into a practical application, then it's a game changer. And that's when mindset, and I don't even like the term because it's bandied about so much, but your thinking plus a practical application creates real results. So this is a great example of pure mindset that has very positive consequences or very damaging consequences to results. So again, as you're thinking about it and going through this, a lot of the time we focus on practical knowledge, skills, application, but we don't realize how valuable this is. But as I said, only works when you have a practical application. So what is an identity level statement? An identity level statement is when you encapsulate who you think you are, usually in a very short statement. So when we meet somebody, one of the questions we often get asked is, well, what's your name? That's an identity level statement. And another one is, what do you do? Okay. So we're looking at I am statements. I am this, I am not. And what I want you to think about it, especially, is one, for yourself, obviously, and two, the people you work with. How do they describe themselves? Because these statements often slip out of their mouths without really thinking about it. But what you're going to do is you're going to get a huge insight into their beliefs about who they are and the value of what they think they can do. So you'll get comments on their skill levels, you'll get all sorts of information that they won't talk about in detail, but they'll say something, an identity level statement, which gives you a very, very quick insight and deep insight into what they believe about themselves. Okay. So if you can be paying attention to this for yourselves and how you think about yourself, it is just a belief. Okay. So you can change it whenever you want. Beliefs are very easy to change because they're not actually real. We only have a belief because we value having them. So when you change your mind about the value of a belief, you can just change your mind. If you want to hold on to a belief for a very long time, you value it, so you hold on to it for a long time. But actually, beliefs are not real. So one of the biggest things in mindset training is, beliefs are difficult to change. Well, they're not, because it's just something you choose to believe or not. And if you really want to believe it, you really value it, guess what? You keep it. That's cool. But if you want to change it, you can change it very, very quickly. The key is to knowing why you want to keep saying something. And as I said, the most powerful illustration of this is identity level statements. So who am I? So is anybody here a parent? So before you became a parent, you were not a parent. I am now a father. I am now a mother. And the moment I suspect your spouse gave birth, yeah, you changed your mind and said, I'm now a dad or a mum or whatever. Fana's listening to this. So a very long-term belief you have about yourself, I'm not a dad or I'm not a mum, I'm not a parent. The moment you had a child, you immediately changed a very, very powerful belief about yourself. And therefore, you then gave yourself a label, or probably gave yourself a label. So what we're looking at is, what do you say about yourself? Because if I said to you, are you a fractional CTO? What would you say? What's the instant thing you say inside your head? Now, if you are moving from a senior engineer and you're not a fractional CTO, and you might say, I want to be, but do you say, I am one? When do you say that you are? When you have your first gig, when you have your third piece of fractional work? When do you actually take on that title? And we do this with all sorts of things, both positive and negatively, so useful and what holds us back. And this is where it ties into imposter syndrome and holding ourselves back, because it describes many things, who we are, but also who we believe we're not. I'm not that sort of person. And I probably mentioned this person before, but a couple of years ago, I was working with somebody who hit a threshold on their sales every month. They had a great system, great revenue for what they did. They were a personal coach in the physical space, so they did gym work, and they had programs. they were on about, I don't know, 15,000 pounds, close to $20,000 a month. For most PTs, that's really good. But when they got to that £15,000 mark, they used to sabotage their sales calls and their marketing, and they didn't know why. But what it came down to, ultimately, they had an identity level statement. If they earned more than that amount of money, then they would be a greedy boy. That's what they said to themselves. Now, that was very deep. They would be a greedy boy. Now, this person is in their, I think, their late 30s. So first of all, they're labeling themselves as being greedy and also a boy. Does that sound like an adult statement? So what you do is, by listening to what people say about themselves, you can find out that actually this person's been run by a bunch of thinking that makes them sabotage their sales calls, damages their results. They know they're doing it. They wish they wouldn't. They have the conflict. It's why we were working together, but they didn't really know why. But when they were talking about it, this came out. So the people you work with and you will say this, and you'll often say things like this very, very quickly and instinctively. Either you'll just say it, but you won't really pick up on it, or they will say something and it will just boom and then gone. It's a very short statement, and it just goes into the conversation, back out again, and you don't pick up on it. But if you do pick up on it, it's an insight into their thinking, and therefore it's an insight into their behavior and the reason for their results. So I cannot stress how valuable this is. I really cannot stress how valuable this is. Yeah. And I know Todd and I've talked about this, and it's big for him as well. I think you're muted, Todd.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, this has been huge for me in my own career, and then I've seen the power of people on my team where maybe they haven't yet gotten into kind of creating their own identities, but being able to grant someone an identity, meaning like helping them see who they really are. For some people, it's almost like they've gotten that permission to step into that fully because someone recognized that in them. And I've seen this in many, many cases where just by kind of telling them the identity that I see them as, instantly levels them up. They start acting and behaving more like that. Not a promotion, not a title change, simply by acknowledging who, the level that they're at. It's really pretty powerful and impressive to see it happen, not just in your own self, but in others that are on your team.
So what I want you to listen for is, first of all, I am statements. I am this, I'm a parent, or I am not a parent. Okay. And they're often quite short statements. Okay. But also I want you to listen to when they start to describe themselves, I am not that sort of person, or I am not at that level, or I am not capable, yeah, or I am not confident. So true identity level statements, when we say this is my identity, I am not a fractional CTO, I am a fractional CTO, but also it blurs the line because it is a belief system, but they also start to describe what their capability is, okay? And if you can pay attention to that when you're working with someone, especially yourselves, and also if you want to level up a person in your team or get them to do something that they do not feel confident yet with, listen to how they how they describe themselves when you ask them to do something. Okay. So, and the real key to this is listening to your instinctive internal response. So, are you a parent? Yeah. And did you say yes or no? Okay. Now, you might want to qualify as I want to be or whatever, but it's that yes or no statement we're looking for, because it's not just about what we say, because anyone can say something, but it's how congruent we are with it. So are you a six-figure consultant? Are you a seven-figure consultant? Are you a Martian? You can say absolutely anything. Yeah. But what you do is you want to look at it and go, where do you then say yes, 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 no? Because if you say no about who you think you are, it tends to affect what you will then do. Because your brain says, I'm not this thing. I am not this person. I am not confident. I am not skillful. I am not a person who can charge that amount. I am not a person who can run that size company. I am not a person who has influence over those sorts of people. So if you can catch yourself saying this, any of these things, then you get to think about, well, why? Why have I chosen that belief over something else? And as I said, if you can catch your team saying it, then you can dig into it and find out, well, has it got to do with their confidence about their skill level, their knowledge level, their experience, and then you can help them move to that level. Okay. So do you believe, say, give yourself a title at the moment, or a title somebody else has given you in the past? Go back and you can do this, retrospectively, but perhaps a title that you've given in the past, or perhaps you're on now. Do you believe you are that person? And how much confidence do you have with that? Yes, that's who I am. And if you say, yeah, that's who I am, it's almost like you shrug your shoulders, and it's like, that's a dumb question. It means that you absolutely believe it. But if you get a no, there's a doubt, or you sometimes hear this, yes. Well, that means there's a no in there to explore, because that's what that no is, where they lose their confidence, and that's where they'll hesitate to take the behavior that you need them to take. Yeah, there'll be something about that means that they won't act confidently. And they might be 80% on 80% of the tasks they need to do, but there's 20% over here that they'll hesitate on, and you're thinking, why? Because they have the skills, they have the knowledge, they can do it, but they don't want to do it, or they don't feel comfortable doing it. Okay. So think about the next title or role or job, or where you're going in your career, consultant, whatever it is. When you think about that, can you take that title on and go, that's who I am? How many of you had a doubt, a little, or even an outright no? Anybody had that? Yeah. Because if you did, that's really good, because you know, if you ask yourself, so what was I doubting about that? It may be, again, 75, 80% you're okay on, but the little bit that you were doubting or hesitating on, you can dig into and actually, why am I doubting that? Do I need some proof? Do I need experience? Do I need to get the job? Or is there something that I'm, doubting in myself, even though that perhaps you do have the skills? So is it a real problem, or is it something you say, yeah, I just need to tick the box and to get the title. I want to get the title, but I won't fully accept it because I haven't got it yet. So the similarity to that is, if you want to buy a new car, okay, is that a Ferrari? Is that a Ferrari cap we got on there, Jared? Yeah, yeah. So, yep. Are you a Ferrari owner? Yeah.
Sadly, no.
Sadly, no. So, if you say to yourself, "Yes, I am a Ferrari owner," what does your brain then do to compute that?
Kind of projects into the future. I will be a Ferrari owner.
Okay. So if you say, no, I'm not, because you're not yet, sadly, no. But if you say, yes, I am, but I haven't done it yet, it projects it into the future, and you actually start goal planning for it. So you can use this in many different ways, because it really is about something incredibly important. So if you've looked at the section in the training on the hierarchy of solutions, I really suggest you dig into all of these things. There are 5 levels of solutions that are in that model. Very simple model. And the one we all want to influence is behavior. Okay. What behavior change do we want to have to get that result we want to get, whether it's you personally, or it's your team, or you want to influence someone in the leadership to make a decision? Behavior is the practical part. That's the real part. And if you want to change a behavior, and say perhaps you're asking a member of your team, hey, can you do that for me? Can you stop what you're doing and do this instead? And they go, yes, no problem. That's the level of solution you need. Just ask them for the behavior change. They're capable of it. They go and do it. Everything's good. You don't need any other level of the model. But what we really need to look at is which are the most powerful and useful solutions. So the simplest one is the best, but the 5th one is environment. Can they environmentally do what you're asking them to do? So if they need a computer and a chair to sit and work on something, do they have a computer and a chair? Is it a nice quiet? It could be something as simple as that. If you're asking them to be creative, do they have the creative space, or to be creative, or are they bombarded with loads of other things? So environment is one. Behavior we've already discussed. The next one is capability and skills. Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the skills? Do they have the experience to actually do what you're asking them to do? So you ask them to change from this to this, and they said, I've never done that before. So these 3 levels of teaching them something, helping them get some skills, the behavior, and then the environment, these are the 3 go-tos that we tend to look at when we're training people or asking for behavior change. But if they are capable, they do have the environment, they are capable of doing the behavior, they do have the skills and knowledge, and they don't do it, then we're what I call above the line. If you go and look at the model, you'll be able to see it, that we need to look at their beliefs and values. Why do they not do it? Why is it something? Why are they doing something else rather than the thing you asked them to do? And the same goes for us. We know we should be doing something, but we don't. We should be putting our prices up, but we don't. Whatever it happens to be. So beliefs and values are our motivators. Why we choose to do the behaviors we do in that environment with the skill level we have. And then above beliefs and values, which is number 2, is our identity, who we think we are. And if we are conflicted at an identity level, we are talking about conflicted in our beliefs and values to such a level that that is not who we are. And that's pretty profound. So to make a decision, we need to look at our beliefs and values. But if we get to the point where we go, I am not that person, what you're doing is you're taking all your beliefs and values and saying, this is who I am, this is who I'm not. And when we get into major conflicts, which creates imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and things like that, it often feels to people like there's two sides of them arguing, two different parts of them. This is where we get those metaphors of the angel and the devil, or the inner child. But really, it's just a conflict of values and beliefs, but such a strong level, it's like I am battling myself. Hence, that guy I worked with said he would be a greedy boy. He sees himself as a young boy. So this is truly profound. And it makes a huge difference to our behaviors. So the more you can listen out for I am statements that you say to yourself. So Jared, if you want to be a Ferrari owner, I am a Ferrari owner. You could do that. You could reject it. You could plan it. You can do all the work then and say, I'm going to be a Ferrari owner. And then you tick the box when you get the keys and you earn it. So are you happy with how you label yourself? And I'm not going to ask people, you say this, but do you have any labels that you know are not good for you? I'm shy. Here's my favorite one that really winds me up. I'm an introvert. Because someone decided to label people as introvert extroverts, even though that doesn't actually work in the real world, because there's a personality profile. And it labels people as introverts and extroverts. And people say, well, engineers are mainly introverts. Yeah, which is not true. They have behaviors that if you measure them, someone will call them introverted. But no one uses that same behavior all of the time in all situations. So if we label ourselves as I'm an introvert, well, what does that mean? I can't stand up and present well. That's not even what introverted means. But that's what people then believe it to mean, and then they take it on and it impacts their behavior. Are you a good communicator? Are you a leader? Are you a manager? What do you say is your I am statements? And do they work for you? Are they useful? Are they valuable? Because we all have them. If you look around the room, and obviously we can't see with Jim, Kevin, Ray, or Brian, but can we see some of this coming on? Or so when you see this behavior, hand on the face, and everyone's just that, yeah. What you'll see when people are internally thinking, they tend to tilt to one side and they tend to put their hand up. This is a very common behavior, but they'll often tilt their head to one side as well. They'll go asymmetric, means they're internally thinking. So if you see that with people, give them time. Okay. So if you were to spend just a couple of minutes now scribbling down on a piece of paper, what are your I am statements that really hold on? I want to ask you, because sometimes this is way too positive. Just a couple of minutes, just write them down on a piece of paper or whatever, tap them out, whatever you do. I am I am not. And as you think about these, are they useful or not? Are they outdated? Did someone else give them to you? Did someone say you are not that sort of person? You're not a planner, you're not a leader, you're not a this, you're not a, you know, did somebody else tell you who you were? And the most common ones are parents, teachers, bosses, people with influence when you're learning and you're trying to frame who you are, and they will tell you. They may have been right, they may have been wrong. It would have been from their perception, but also very simply, is it outdated? Have you moved on since then? Think about the sector you work in. I am an expert in this. It tends to pigeonhole us into that area. But if you say, I have an expertise in this sector, what is the expertise I have and my experience from this sector? How could I use it in another sector? It then becomes something much more flexible rather than I am a person who works on this particular part of the business. If you look at it that way, you might realize you've got a whole skill set from one area of the tech sector, which is perfect for over here, but you never join the dots because you said, I am a whatever. So these identity shifts often get, they often get a bit shaky when people move from worker to leader, from individual contributor to leader, from employee to owner or entrepreneur. So anybody who's running your own business, when do you become an entrepreneur? When do you say, I am an entrepreneur? Because that's a really interesting one, because most people then think of, who do you think of when you think of an entrepreneur? So we have a comparison usually someone famous, someone who's created big businesses, and you think, well, how can I be? Because they're up there and I'm down here, I'm starting out, they run a multi-billion company. I cannot be an entrepreneur. So therefore you say, I'm not. Rather than what is an entrepreneur and how do you behave as an entrepreneur that's right for your company and how you want to operate, rather than in a comparison.
That was a big one for me personally. I had a very specific entrepreneurial picture in my head of what a Silicon Valley founder was. And I thought that was, really kind of the only way to go about it, raise billions of dollars, take incredible risk, have a massive team, all the sort of pressure around a specific type of business. And just because that was where my career was so focused, I felt that was the only way to go about it. And so as I learned more about some of the different ways to approach business as an entrepreneur, it started to appeal to me more. Or initially I was like, oh, I'm not going to be an entrepreneur because I had a very narrow view of it. I'm content being, an early employee or something like that. And so just learning more about what was possible, what the options were, totally blew up my belief and understanding that allowed me to then step into that identity. Another example I've had in my own career was I had a belief, which I still believe this is true, but it's less of a kind of a linchpin in my identity, which was I work well under pressure. That was something I always told myself, like in school, on the job. And what that actually created was a tendency to procrastinate until the last minute and create that pressure so I could perform. And that would then stress me out. But I was like, well, I'm good under pressure. So it became this like cyclical kind of vicious cycle. And so that was an example of something I had to really update about myself. I still believe I have that mode, but it's not as core to my identity and part of my strategy. And so since I shifted that, this was years ago, but it made things a lot easier. I focused more on being a good planner and being resourceful and being ahead of things. And it totally shifted things for me.
the working well under pressure is something I was shackled with early in my career, which is a pretty terrible thing to have happen because I was willing to just do things to get it right. So in essence, I was put in a position consistently where the reality is I was just good at being okay with taking the final step and taking the responsibility. I hated to work under that pressure, but because I was able to do it, it was something I was often labeled with, like I fixed the entire Sony platform when I worked there multiple times, and it would just be like shit went sideways, and I would be like, everybody's like, well, Robbie's working on it. Well, yeah, because all of you don't have the ability to fix it, but also who else is going to do it, right? Like, so I fill the hole. It's funny when you talk about like the I am statements, Steve, and I think the one for me that is the most consistent through my career is like, I am a utility player, right? Like I fill whatever hole needs to be filled in the moment. That's like one of my big superpowers, but that sucks because you always are doing something that's not what you want to be doing, right? It's like, I'm competent enough to do anything. So I often was like 3 years at a job, becoming a senior at something, and then moving to the next thing because a fire happened and they were like, well, Robbie can learn that. Like, so it's so funny that like, I too, Todd, was in the same position of like, I can do this. I can accomplish under pressure. But I found that I was like, why am I getting an ulcer at like 28 years old? This is ridiculous, and it was really just because I was good at it didn't mean I had this conversation with my wife years ago, my first wife, and I was like, just because I'm good as an IT person in networking, do I have to do this forever? And she was like, no. and when you feel like you have to do it because you can, it's extremely liberating to walk away and say like, I don't want to work under that pressure, right? Like that was it for me, Todd, for sure.
Yeah. And that's a great example of what Todd and Rob both said. It's a difference between your capability of behavior, capabilities, and of the hierarchy of solutions. You're capable of working in a certain way, but that's not who you are, and it certainly doesn't encapsulate who you are. And true control is when you have the ability to create more options. You have variety of solutions. So if you get labeled as one of these things, someone tells you, perhaps you pull something out of the bag, you do an amazing job, someone goes, you're brilliant at this, you're brilliant at working under pressure, you're brilliant at solving these things, your value goes up and you get a round of applause, but you get labeled, then you get pigeonholed, and then you get stuck. So the purpose of this session is to really go deep dive, think, and just what do you believe about yourself? Because you will have freedom in all sorts of areas because you are crafting your identity, which then crafts your brand, crafts you go for the things you really want to go for, and then you can choose to use your skill sets, in the way you want to use them. And as a leader, you will get more out of your people because you will help them break through that, and they won't get pigeonholed in the same way. Okay, you'll get much higher productivity because you'll look at them and go, they are more than just the label of the tech expertise they come with, for example. Because you can see the qualities they have, but then do they believe it? Have they even thought about being? And my favorite one for you guys as leaders is being the manager you need to support you, to organize you, to keep you away from doing all the low-level managerial stuff that perhaps you don't want to do. So is that person ready to jump from a worker to being a manager? Are they comfortable with it? Have they even thought about it? Because it can be quite a big thing. Solopreneur to business leader. It's the same thing. I've met many solopreneurs who have a team. They just don't act like a business leader or manager, or, the leader to that team, because they still think of themselves as a solopreneur. They might have a big team, but they don't use that team effectively because of that, because that's who they see themselves as. And the thing that we also need to look at as this starts to develop, and you get these snapshots of these I am statements, and you start to talk about and think about it and analyze it into the beliefs and the values. Remember, values are what you think is important, beliefs are the rules you have and the reasons why you've chosen it to be valuable. Is that you start to find out where it comes from or why it's there, and is it still appropriate? But you'll also start to then dive into, well, not just the I am about my title or who I believe I am, but you start to add in the capability level, the skill level. I am an excellent ABC. I am a good. And this is when you start to say this stuff to yourself, it doesn't have to be out loud, but when you say it to yourself and you're congruent and comfortable with that, you'll behave in a congruent and comfortable manner. Because, yeah, I am a good leader. Yeah, and you take it truly on without that little bit in the back of your head, or that, you know, the sabotage thinking that creates imposter syndrome. Jump in and go, no, you're not. If you've got one of those, you need to go and dive into that section and look at that, why you have that sabotage stuff. But when you can say, no, I'm here, it means you actually then, most importantly, can focus on actually your decision making and your behaviors, because your thinking is in the right place about who you are. And here's a great example of this. Have you ever met anybody who's working on being a good leader, or working on something, and they never allow themselves to get there? Because then it sounds like a good motivation. It sounds like a good thing to do, because you're always diligently working on improving. But what you have to do is it's 99 times out of 100, not even 9 out of 10. It comes from fear of failure or fear of messing up or not being good enough. Not, I want to be a really good manager or really good leader or really good parent. It's usually from I am not good enough. Now, if you say, I am a good parent, and you can list why, it doesn't stop you from trying to be better. You can still improve it, but what you've got is a baseline, and you're never not failing. It's a really subtle thing, but if you say, yeah, I'm good at this, I'm pleased with this, I'm happy with this, I am that person, I'm a good person, I'm a moral person, then you can always develop and improve for whatever motivation. But you're not chasing a when will I be good enough? And this is what imposter syndrome really is. When will I be good enough? And most people who've got that sort of issue about being good enough, whether it's you, your staff, or anybody else, most of them don't have an answer to when they will be. If you ask them, they don't really know. They can't pinpoint it. So it's always a perpetual chase of not failing. Rather than saying, you know, I mean, we got some musicians in the room, you know, Todd, are you a musician?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, Brian, I'm going to ask you because you've got your guitars behind you because you should. Yeah, are you a musician?
I am.
Okay, here's a question. Are you good musicians?
I falter there.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, because probably what you did was a comparison, yeah? Or you were worried about what people would say. You would have to justify it, yeah? See how easy it is to ask that question. Now, what level and standard are we talking about, gentlemen?
It's arbitrary.
It is. So why don't you pick your level, yeah, and say, I'm a good guitarist, I'm a good musician, that's good, and I enjoy it and everything, but I'm aiming to get better. You set a goal because it's enjoyable. So you pick up a guitar and use it, and you can still task yourself and getting better as a leader or a guitarist or whatever. But the moment you say I am, and especially if you can qualify it with a description of your level, which you're comfortable with, you're happy with, then what happens is your identity level, your beliefs and values level, your skills, and your behavior in that environment, the 5 levels align, and you just get on with it. You just use it. Not doubting. Does that make sense? So we want to impact behavior and results, but this is incredibly important because it's like, well, when does somebody tell you that you're a good musician? When do you let yourself say you're a good musician? And now your clients will want you to be able to prove your level by proof of what you've done, or you've got a member of your team that you want to, you know, help and move up to a certain level, and they may not be the level you need them at, but have they improved? Have they got to a certain level that you can go, well done, you're now at this level. Hey, let's take you to the next level, because this is what we're going to be talking about when we're talking about giving feedback and how to do it and keep people positive. You can give feedback in a certain way that helps people cement what they've achieved and then still help them move forward because they want to. So identity level is your insight into their beliefs and values and whether they will use their skills and knowledge in that particular behavior or not. It's one of the fastest ways. But as I said, usually someone just throws a statement out. And if you're not paying attention to it, it'll just slip into the conversation straight back out again. Here's another way of doing it. Thank somebody for doing a good job. Genuinely, they've done a good job, you thank them. How many people do you know then go, oh, it was nothing, or, oh, I wasn't, yeah. Immediately, you're going to hear about what they think about it and how comfortable they are being recognized for doing a good job. And if you think about it, and this is going to where we're going shortly in terms of, helping people with, how to give feedback. If you say this and say, oh, it was nothing, and someone's just complimented, oh, it was nothing, it was, oh, it's no problem. You've just insulted them and you've undervalued yourself because they've just praised you for something and then you just undervalued it. So insulting somebody for complimenting them is one thing, and then you just undervalued yourself. Are you talking about in business? But saying, no, I did this. Yes, thank you. Thank you for recognizing I did a good job. It's the truth, isn't it? If you did a good job, someone thanks you for it. It's the truth. There's evidence there. Does it mean that you're not humble, though? Or you're big-headed? Identity level statement that you're possibly trying to avoid? Greedy boy. Do you have any of those? You're arrogant. There's another big one people fear. But the evidence is you did a good job. It's not arrogant. It's proof. You did it. So what is it that you say to yourself? That's really the impact. I just want you to go away and really focus on that this week if you choose to. And what is it that you are, not believing in? Have you ever worked with anybody or had anyone in your team and, they just didn't believe in themselves or want to believe in themselves, even though the evidence was absolutely abundant and everyone thought they're amazing. They're the only one who didn't want to see it. And I say didn't want to see it. We all know people like that, don't we? So what is the benefit for them not wanting to accept who they are and their skill level and their value? Because if you can help them as the leader recognize their value, they will love you as a person and follow you as a leader. And you've already got a great person in the team anyway, but who will then be more confident and more, capable of doing more things. So the last thing I want to think about is what is the benefit of not believing in yourself or saying something? Fear of failing if you say you're going to do something, fear of being judged, criticized, being said you're big-headed, arrogant, What happens if you go for something and you fail? Because we saw it with Todd. Thanks very much for playing Todd. You didn't know that was coming, but yeah, you saw the hesitation. Yeah. Who's the better guitarist, you or me, Todd?
I haven't heard you play, but I don't think you play, so I'm gonna go with me.
Exactly right. Yeah, you're a good musician in my eyes. Yeah, better than. So, what is your definition? Yeah.
It's all relative.
So, as leaders, we have to set our own benchmarks. Yes, we have to broadcast that to our potential clients, and we have to show that we're worthy of that. But if we doubt ourselves first, then there's no chance of other people might see the value in you, but as a leader, they don't hire you to coach you to be the leader. They want you to be the leader in the first place. You might have to help people up from, worker to manager, or worker to, a higher level. That's your job because they're new to it. But as leaders, you should be proud of yourself that you are a leader. You have that skill and capability in your definition. And then you find the people that want your definition in the marketplace. Small little topic for a Monday morning.
It's funny, Stephen. I just I founded Geek on Film and started a podcast, and it was really interesting to have to visit this recently. Of like, I'm a podcaster, like going to my first film festival and getting introduced to a director because I'm talking to them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Robbie runs a podcast. He's a podcaster." Like, it was a hard one because like that's not a title I've had before or felt like I could. But I recently just went through this, so it's interesting to think about it from like not being a tech leader, but like from the other side of the perspective of like something else,
Yeah.
And it was really interesting to reckon every time I felt impostery, like why? Like most podcasts are just by cinephiles, not by somebody who went to film school, right? Like it's okay, but having to constantly come back and be like, is it okay I call myself a film podcast? Like it was a very interesting last 6 months of my life. And now 17 episodes in, right, I feel a lot more confident. Like, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you then, Robbie, if you don't mind. A lot more confident. There's the language. When will you be completely confident that you are a podcaster?
Yeah, I think when it's making money, right? When it goes into the black.
Right.
But
So
I think I'm successfully podcasting. I think it's whether or not it's a successful business, I think will confirm whether or not I'm actually a podcaster. But I probably shouldn't hold it up to the business, to be honest.
Well, that's when if you choose it to be a definition, that's how you judge when you're a podcaster, successful podcaster, when it's making money from a business. Or you can say, well, somebody with a different definition will then say, when I have an audience of, when I affect somebody, when I or some people, when they've just done loads of podcasts because they have no reason to do it other than the fact they want to be a podcaster. So long as you're happy with your definition of more confidence. So what happens if you say, I am a podcaster, done. Now let's work on the business model.
I think what's interesting is one anchor for me is getting a press pass to a film festival, right? Like, but I think at this point I can say I'm a podcaster after 17 episodes, right? But
Sure.
Yeah, there's interesting things to put. Like, I'm trying to think of milestones. I think that's a good one of like to really think about the success of it as a business. But yeah, you're right. I should just say like I have a sticker literally that says I'm a podcaster, right?
Yeah. And you are a podcaster. You can't deny that. Okay, but now let's work on some milestones to help your business, like getting the press pass, making some money. That's a thing you do, not an identity. And this is when do we confuse these two? Do they need to be confused, or is one of them, yes, I've ticked that. Okay, now I can move on to not, I will be more confident. I will have all of my confidence. Yeah, because that's the little thing that stops you there. But actually, it's actually about something else. How do I get a press pass and how do I make money out of it? That's a different thing from being a podcaster.
And the noun, right?
Saying in, Robbie?
I said I am the noun. I am the podcaster, right? Like I am actively that person at this point.
Yes, you are. Cool. Todd, did you have something?
I like to think of it. Yeah, I was gonna say I like to think of it as like three different buckets. So like be, do, and have. Be are the things like I am X. Do are the things that X does, the behaviors that X participates in, and then the last step is what are the things that that person has. And so I think a lot of people kind of approach it like the opposite direction. They say, well, what are the things I want to have? I want to have all kinds of money and success and things like that. But they're not doing that precursor step that is being the person that has those things, doing the things that that kind of person does to then create things that you have. And so that's like looking back when I'm doing my identity work, I keep track of all the different identity statements I've had over the years and actually track this stuff. And that gives me even more momentum and belief in kind of new identities, because I've seen how I've been able to transform it over the years, starting from like, initially I was like, I'm a small town kid. That was how I started my life, you know, leaving my hometown. And then, you know, all the different iterations over the years to where I am now. And so I find it helpful to kind of keep track of the different identity statements as I've transformed, and then break it up into the be, do, have kind of buckets instead of trying to put it all under the one kind of mega identity.
Has it got you thinking, everybody? I hope it has, because this is absolutely life-changing for yourself and for your team. And it also takes the stress off a lot of the time, because you're not chasing something that you've already achieved. Or if you're going to want to achieve something, then you can actually set a plan to achieve it. So just to recap, do you have labels, identity level statements, beliefs that are out of date? Perhaps were given to you by somebody else, that actually they don't have to be you. What can you be? Who can you be? If you're not congruent with that, you've got an argument, dive in and find out why you got the argument. It may be that there's something that's just getting in the way. Perhaps it's a justification of, you know, of a belief that I've got to achieve something before I can call myself this. Because at the end of the day, it's just a belief system. But beliefs are the thing that control your values, and your values are the things that control your motivation to act, which is where the results come. So I would, you know, whatever way you do it, pen and paper next to you, just pay attention to what you say about yourselves. Is it helpful? Does it help you motivate you, or do you hold yourself back? And then pay attention to the people around you. You know, kids, if you've got them, spouse, team, obviously, work related. Just listen to how people actually talk about themselves, and then practice thinking, okay, well, and all the other things in the training, if you start, this is one thing that really helps you dive deep into, hey, what's going on in their thinking? Because you'll hear it and you'll go, why did they say that about themselves? And then you'll get a very, very quick snapshot of what their beliefs and values are, which will help you understand their behavior when they're working with you, for you, next to you, family, whatever. Very fast. Cool. So that's me done. Any thoughts, any questions, any advice, any tips, experience for anybody else? We've come to the top of the hour and a lot of people got to jump off.
Just some light food for thought.
I think the I statements are so good, Stephen, because one of the things we saw is I worked with a bunch of people who were like type A personalities at the White House. And then once in a while, you would randomly run into an important person, right? Like I know somebody who was an amazingly powerful, strong woman, and she ran into the president on the White House campus. And literally he was like, so what do you do? And she like stuttered and stammered. And it turned into like a funny thing for all of us at USDS to be like, if Shannon can get broken, that's terrible for the rest of us. but then it turned into like us having an elevator pitch if you ran into the president, right? And a lot of what we're talking about here was that, right? Like I am a USDSer who works at the VA helping veterans, right? Like, but it was really interesting that like we turned that into like everybody should have a 30-second elevator pitch of what you do here, because you never know when you're going to run into President Obama and you're going to freak out, right? Like, so just practice, be ready, you know. But I feel like this is very good, right? Like when you reinforce it a bunch of times, it not only do you feel like you're right, but it also makes it you're manifesting it on top of it, you know.
Yeah, and often people, that's a good point. Often people have a level of their confidence. And then if they speak, I'm not a person who can speak to that level. And in business, I think I said this before, I can speak to the CTO, I can speak to the CEO, I don't want to talk to the CFO. I can't, I'm not a person who understands, and boom, and they just build a brick wall around themselves and they go, and they crumble within that wall, so they just can't do it. So it's interesting you had that experience with, Obama, because I'm sure he, likes to humiliate people for not being good enough, so no one wants the CFO. Yeah. Cool. Anybody else?
So, there's an interesting aspect about this that is true of a lot of us because of our roles, I think. We often don't fit into boxes. Sorry. Alexa, stop. Wonderful timing there. We often don't fit into those nice categorical boxes that people try to put people in, which is a lot of the IMs, like, someone's role, for example, as a database designer, right?
Yeah.
So I was curious. I mean, I know one of the ways that I've helped my team do this is there's the concept of roles and responsibilities. So everyone writes code, but some people are software architects, meaning they're better at doing design, high-level design and things like that. And I personally give myself skill ratings, being 100% honest. Like, can I do front-end development? Absolutely. I'm more of like a 7 out of 10, whereas one of my guys is a 10 out of 10. But I mean, that's kind of helped me because it's articulated the level I feel I'm at where I could be if I spend 100% of my time on something. I could be here, but this is where I'm at, and it's enough to help me get across well, can I do this? And I'm going to be able to do good enough for what they need, because they're not doing NASA with this.
Yeah. So in terms of the hierarchy of solutions, then what you've done is you've gone down into your capability level and examined it, and you gave yourself a belief about your capability level. So you qualified your identity level statement, which is actually what people need in the real world. And this is what makes it practical, because this is then you say, well, I'm not the best person for this because I've got someone in my team who's a 10 out of this. And then, then you know where you are, if you want to get better, what do I need to do? Or actually I'm better at something else. And it gives you confidence to be clear on your identity level statements by, giving yourself, am I a good guitarist? Well, what does that mean? But it doesn't stop you from improving. It just lets you know in a practical way, because otherwise you can have these I am statements up floating around. It doesn't actually do you much good, or, ticks a box, but how do you practically use it? Which, one of the things Kevin said, makes you be able to, choose. This is where I am. That's a useful thing to do. Cheers, Kevin. Anybody else? Who shifted an identity level statement? Anybody else want to say anything?
I found that I didn't really think about it like with this framework or this kind of level of like systematic way to break it down. But like last couple of years, as I've been trying to stay on top of like being fit and having healthier eating habits and stuff, I found like I was letting myself off the hook big time when I would say things like, oh, I want to be like, I caught myself saying like, oh yeah, I want to do this. I should do that. Like I should go for a run today. I kind of realized at some point, I was like, this is really annoying, like ebbs and flows of being into it for a couple of weeks and falling out. And like, I couldn't cement it in. And long story short, I like realized at some point, I was like, I'm just going to start kind of saying, yeah, I am like a fit person. And then like, what should I be doing to align with that? And then it made it a little easier to be like, okay, well, I'm not gonna go for a run today, but that doesn't mean I'm not I'm not anchored in this not being what I wanted to be kind of identity framework thing. But now that I have like the language and like looking at it, I can look back and like, oh, I guess kind of tricked myself in a good way there to get to
Well, you
redo that shift. But yeah, I didn't think about it so formally. It was more out of frustration and kind of just like, why can't I make this stick? So.
And you said the word should, and sometimes you can actually use an identity level statement. You can actually just say, I am unfit. And then you use that frustration.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because you've got a strong enough motivation. Because at the end of the day, it's motivation. It's acting on your values that get the job done. So you can say, I am a fit person. What do I need to get fit? Or I can say, I am not fit and I'm peed off. What am I going to do about it? And then either way, you're motivated and you can shift your level and your identity and then your behavior. So wherever you're at, I am not a fractional CTO yet. Right, what do I need to do? I'm a fractional CTO. Yes, good. I'm confident because I'm now doing that role. So you can use it in both ways. You use it whatever way, but knowing why you're declaring yourself something or not, it's the motivation, understanding of that, which then turns it into value, belief, action in whatever environment to get the behavior you need to get the result. That's where those 5 things go together. So dive into that if you haven't. Please do, because it's a simple model, but also use it in lots of different ways to solve problems. But yeah, it's good. And as long as it works for you, as long as you're happy with it, it doesn't matter which way around you use it. And you can use it, both ways. This is, I always think of problems, goals, bookends. This is a problem, there's the goal. Where am I starting? I'm here. Where do I want to be? Action in between. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think I've personally struggled with identifying as a CTO. Even though that's my role, I have 5 engineers that work for me. I'm responsible for the technical decisions for the company. And it's like that is the role. But sometimes I'll be like, well, I head up the engineering team or something like that. And I think as I've thought about it before this session, but definitely today, it's like I think there's I have this internal expectation that the CTO is the smartest guy on the team and understands the technology better than everybody else, right? And so when I have these rock stars working for me that are definitely better at doing what they do, writing backend APIs or database migrations, or they're a React engineer, and the last time I touched React was 4 years ago, I can kind of get stuck and like, well, actually I'm not. Like, these guys know all the system, at least parts of the system better than I. So if I call myself the CTO, then it just feels weird. So yeah, still working through that.
I'll give you a good way to describe it that I just thought about that is very true, and is that I would define us on this call as one of the things we are force multipliers. We take assets, technical assets, people assets, and we make them perform better, right? We might be a CTO, yep. We might be like Robbie's working on like being more of a consulting style, a subject matter expert, right? We take whatever you have and we make it operate at a better level than you would without us and you would without most people.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's a different definition. So there's lots of definitions. And what happens is, someone will give you a label, or this is what a CTO does, or you go and look it up in a definition and someone somewhere defined it. But is that definition still right? Is the definition right for the company you're working in? Is it the right definition? I hate being called a coach. One of the biggest reasons I hate being called a coach is so many coaches out there are absolutely atrociously bad. So I avoided that. And it was like, well, what are you then? I'm a coach. Yeah. Because I'm a trainer, I'm a this, I'm a dancer, I'm a dad, So I had to make peace with my definition of a coach. And I have to justify it, and I'll tell people why and what, and I will say most 90% of the coaches out there are rubbish. Okay. So what's your definition of being a CTO, Garrett? You had Kevin's one. Perhaps you think about that. What's your definition of who you are, your value? And use that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have a few competing ones in my head. So
Yeah.
I need to write it down and refine it a bit.
So maybe that the classic definition is wrong, but you have to be at that level. That's what you're called. Yeah. But if you have a conflict with somebody else's definition or the industry definition, or just make sure you're working to yours. And then most importantly, let your results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
But if you have that conflict because you're not the person who understands those frameworks as well as your superstars, then if that makes you feel uncomfortable in any way and makes you lose confidence, makes you not, then you're underselling yourself for no reason, because it may not be the right definition. Well, it sounds like it's not. You've already identified that. Make your own definition, because that's your personality. That's who you're selling to the people who want that skill set compared to another skill set. And then if you just think about it, how many of you work for people who had the title of CTO, but they were absolutely terrible? Or really good in one area, but incompetent in other areas? So were they the right definition?
No comment.
It's what they had on their resume, but what you had on your resume doesn't define you.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you are being who you truly are and showing the results from that, then you'll beat the paper sift, because people will come to you because of you, not because you're applying for a role, as Brian found.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think that the definition of CTO varies so much based on the type of company and the niche that you're in. If you're going down the fractional CTO path, early stage CTO work is completely different from like IPO stage CTO work. And so there's an incredibly broad way to define this, that you can think about the types of work that you want to do in the companies that you want to help, and use that to help define what the CTO is for you, because you're essentially just aligning your identity to who you want to help and how you want to work the best. So there's tons of leeway there.
yeah.
I'm advising a good friend of mine on his board, and one of the things I keep telling him is like, why does your company have to be a full stack delivery organization? You're so good at product management, and you have such a native tongue in that space. And every time he hires an engineer, he's like, I don't know how to talk to them. And I'm like, well, then, can't you just become a niche company that supports this specifically? Like, build the company you want to work for, or hire somebody to talk to your engineers. But like, you're short shrifting yourself and your employees because you feel this need,
Yeah. So I hope that's really got you thinking about your definition. I mean, we talk about definition of work a lot, but this comes up higher. Your identity comes up higher, and it helps you define your work, helps you define everything. Anything from anybody else? If not, we'll call it. Great stuff. So throw up your definitions of who you are. Start throwing that up in Slack and getting feedback from people, and you might provoke somebody else's idea, or they'll come back and ask you about questions about why you do that, so you can get better at it. Yeah. Brilliant stuff, everybody. As usual, we're here, available. Reach out if you need us. And we've got, is it an entrepreneur session this week, Joy?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Perhaps I'll see you on there then on Wednesday. But as usual, reach out, have a good day, and remember to use this through the whole of the week. That's what we do this beginning of the week. Make sure it stays there, working on it and practicing it. Anyway, take care, everybody.